Suddenly, the economy becomes an issue in the governor's race. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Jackie Borchert, Columbus Bureau Chief for the Cincinnati Enquirer, Joe Ingles, State House reporter for Ohio Public Radio, Mike Gonidakis, Republican strategist, and Joseph Maas of the Ohio Hispanic Coalition. Election wins and losses usually come down to the economy. If the economy is doing well, incumbents have the advantage. Recessions usually prompt voters to change teams. Until recently, the economy has not been a big issue in the race for governor. Richard Cordray has focused much of his attention on health care, Mike DeWine on law and order issues. That has changed in recent days. Cordray really can't complain about Ohio's low unemployment rate, so he targets DeWine's record on workers' rights. Mike DeWine, however, is blaming Cordray for the recession from 10 years ago. Here are the latest ads.
We didn't forget you, Richard Cordray. You were there when our taxes were hiked and over 400,000 jobs were killed, forcing so many of us to the unemployment line. And now that we've recovered, you're back. You're back trying to force upon us those same job-killing taxes.
Two candidates for governor, two economic plans. Mike DeWine's plan, corporate giveaways, tax cuts for the wealthy. Rich Cordray, a plan for the middle class, vocational training so Ohioans can earn more, a balanced budget with no new taxes.
Getting us beyond the fact that we really don't have unemployment lines anymore. We do it by phone or by computers. Why is the economy, Jackie, becoming an issue right now, do you think, in this campaign?
I mean, the economy is usually the biggest issue in an election, and Republicans are in a difficult position in that the economy is really good, and people don't focus on the positive things. They want to focus on the negative things that they can fix. And, while certainly for a lot of people in Ohio, they feel like the economy isn't good for them personally, their families and people they know. And, I think we've seen Democrats try to get at that. But it is interesting now to see Mike DeWine and others. This is also trickling down to the state house races, bringing up the recession from 10 years ago and trying to say, hey, there were Democrats in charge then. And, if you elect Democrats, this is going to happen again. Now, of course, the recession did not just happen in Ohio. It was a national recession. And so, the Cordray campaign and others who are being targeted are saying, hey, we weren't responsible for that. We weren't doing that. But yeah, seeing the economy I think it's natural for Republicans to want to say, hey, we're doing a good job. We need to keep it up. But that message is hard to get. It's hard to win on an economy that's good.
And Joe, Richard Cordray was not, he was state treasurer first, then attorney general. He was not the person who was, they didn't raise taxes, they delayed a tax cut.
Right.
He wasn't responsible for any economic policies, but he's getting blamed because he's a Democrat.
That's pretty much it. And these 30-second ads, they can blame anyone for anything. Let's face it, this is a good reason why people maybe should turn off the TV a little bit, during this season, because these ads get kind of crazy on both sides, on all sides. But yeah, I mean, he had nothing to do with that. But, let's not forget that every single time there's an election, candidates are going to be blamed for raising taxes and for doing things that they didn't do. So this is another case where voters really need to check the facts.
And in fact, bringing up the economy for a gubernatorial race makes all the sense in the world. I think that so long as you don't lie, so long as you don't stretch the truth, but then that's, I guess, the job of the respondent, right, the one who responds to it, to bring it to everybody's attention. Look, the 2008 recession was caused primarily because of hijinks in the real estate market and the financing thereof. Had nothing to do with Strickland. It certainly had nothing to do with Cordray, and as you mentioned, he was AG for a couple of years.
So is it a stretch, Mike, to blame Richard Cordray for the economy of 2008, 2010?
No, not at all. I think it's very smart for Mike DeWine to do what he's doing because the economy is good today. All the right track, wrong track numbers favor the GOP, the party in power. If it was Democrats in power right now, they would say, guys, unemployment's low, people have jobs, you're getting wage increases. Mike's he's doing the right job reminding people that, hey, back in the Strickland Cordray years when the Democrats were in power, from 06 to 2010, we had problems with the economy. Today, things are going great. Why change coaches right now? If the GOP is doing their job, Ohioans are happy where we are. Let's keep this train going. He's doing the right thing.
But why is it taking him so long to get on this? Because for the first 2 months of the meat of the campaign, like post-Labor Day, it was all about rape kits and issue 1, the sentencing reform package. the economy was barely getting a mention. But why now in the last 3 weeks, well, 10 days of the campaign now?
Yeah, great question. I think, as the CEO of the state, you need to be able to talk about multiple issues. I think his internal polling showed that early on, focus on the rape kits and other issues. And then now as we get closer, get back to the economy, reminding Ohioans how good we have it right now and why go back to 2008 to 2010.
No, I agree. I think it is because of polling that he's trying to throw something else at the wall. However, with respect to the allegation that Cordray is going to raise taxes, there's absolutely no evidence of that. He hasn't said it, and it's not part of his plan.
But he has a long wish list of things he wants to do, and how do you do that without getting more revenue? The economy would have to remain strong at least. But
At the very least, that would have to happen, and I'm sure that someone will ask him that.
Well, and he's got a bond issue, too, that he's proposed that would do a lot of those things that you're talking about, and that would not raise taxes. Now, I know, I hear you. I know where you're going.
Well.
But, we had the Third Frontier project in Ohio. That didn't raise taxes. I mean, there are many times where you have a bond issue, and it really does some good for the community, and the good that it does actually produces revenue that leads the economy in a good way.
Jackie, how long are voters' memories? It's 8 years. I mean, nowadays.
30
it's like,
seconds, 15 seconds.
Judge Brett, who? I mean, after all that's happened in the past 3 weeks, I mean, are they going to remember the economy from 2008, 2009? That was a long time ago.
We talk about polling, and recent polls have shown that the economy is the #1 issue for Republican voters. Healthcare is the #1 issue for Democratic voters. And I think that's why you're seeing candidates push those issues and kind of charge their opponents as failing on those issues. That's why we're seeing this big debate about pre-existing conditions. And it's not just in Ohio. You're seeing this in other states as well, because the healthcare is a big issue for Democratic voters. And I think what you're seeing in these final 10 days is a push to get the base out, to remind the base, hey, these are issues you care about, and this other guy is going to do terrible on them. So you need to go and get to the polls and do your job and vote.
John Kasich sent out an email this week asking people to give money to Mike DeWine, so he's more involved in that campaign. He's apparently going to cut a TV ad, we're hearing from reports. Joe, what impact would he have in the last week, 2 weeks of the campaign, do you think?
I don't know. That might actually backfire because a lot of the Republicans don't like, he's lost favor with a lot of the Republicans, especially the far-right Republicans, and that might not play well with them. And, I don't know. I think he's trying to go after the independent voters. Maybe it would play well with them, and especially since we have so many independent voters in Ohio, but that remains to be seen, actually.
Let me ask you the same question, Mike. Why so long to get John Kasich to cut an ad for Mike DeWine when we only have less than 2 weeks to go before the election?
That's an awesome question. I don't have an answer for you for that, but the bottom line is he's still going to cut it, and it's going to play well with suburban Republicans, suburban women, and as Joe said, independents. So it'll help because, again, we have a 30-second attention span, and the last thing people are going to see is an endorsement from John Kasich for Mike DeWine, and that'll help them.
Does that worry Democrats?
No, a little late for money, in my opinion. I think that the tide is already coming in.
That was more of a symbol that Kasich's with me, I think, more than the dollar amounts that they need at this point, my guess is.
Probably so.
Yeah. All right, the race between Sherrod Brown and Jim Renacci continues its less than amicable tone. The two men debated in this studio last week. The event almost did not happen because of a dispute over who could watch from the studio, of all things. But the debate did occur, and Renacci used his one question to Brown to bring up the senator's 1986 divorce and now recanted allegations of abuse.
Senator, do you believe any instance of domestic violence or sexual assault disqualifies anyone from not only serving in the House or Senate, but serving in a public office?
Congressman Renacci, I've answered that question numerous times with you, numerous times. My former wife has asked that you stop attacking our family. The state's newspapers have asked you to stop making these kinds of disgusting allegations. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Moderator Colleen Marshall was ready for that exchange. She asked Renacci if Brown should be disqualified, so shouldn't President Trump, who faces documented allegations of abuse.
This isn't about President Trump. Look, there are a lot of things about President Trump that he says or does that maybe I don't like, but I do like what he's doing in the economy. So in the end, if that's what wants to be used in the 2020 campaign, it can be used.
Michael Dukakis, how can he ask that public officials accused of abuse and documented papers have to step down but not say Donald Trump has to step down when his allegations have been documented.
Well, it appears to be a double standard, but at the end of the day, it's Jim Renacci versus Sherrod Brown for the Senate seat in the state of Ohio. So let's focus on that.
But he listed at least 7 or 8 people from other states in asking that question, Al Franken being one.
Sure, absolutely, and he's doing his job. Renacci, look, this is not much of a race. Sherrod Brown is going to win. He's going to be reelected, and that wasn't much of a debate. Neither was the first one at the end of the day. But there was a signed sworn affidavit by his former wife. All he has to do is address it instead of saying, quit attacking my family. If Sherrod Brown or his former wife would just address the signed sworn affidavit, this issue could have gone away months ago.
Well, they have
refused to address it.
They've addressed it. Brown said he never heard his ex-wife, and his ex-wife says that they were angry words and it was just a messy divorce. That's not enough for you?
Well, when you sign, Joe's a lawyer as I am, when you submit to the court a signed sworn affidavit saying my ex-husband now but beat me, I mean, those are serious allegations. That's perjury. If she was lying, that's perjury.
There seems to be a different climate altogether when you start looking at divorces and documents filed in divorces. I have not seen that particular affidavit. However, I was a divorce attorney for 20 of my 40 years of practice, and you do hear, and sometimes reluctantly, sometimes not, type in the prepared affidavits allegations that you wonder if this thing actually happened or not, or if it's expressed in a particular way. I suspect that that's where we are. I know that shortly after the divorce, they seem to have at least socially reconciled, and it's continued that way for many, many years. But I think if you go back and you look at the filings for half the divorces, if not all of the divorces in Franklin County, you find similar allegations.
Should we look at these differently now in the Me Too thing, where now it's you must believe the victim, in most cases women? Should we look at all those cases differently now?
I think so, but in this case, the victim is saying, no, it was just angry words. Maybe the attorney typed it wrong and I didn't look at it when I signed it. I've heard that before, and that happens.
Jackie?
Yeah, I think that the biggest takeaway from the Me Too movement is to listen to women and to the victims. And in this case, the victim, a woman, is saying, it was messy, don't want to go there anymore, leave us alone. I mean, I don't know what more you can do. And yes, there's a record from 30 years ago, but what is the woman saying now? And
Joe, why do you think that they're making, I mean, as Mike said, this race is not close. It's 15 points probably on average in most polls. It'd be a huge upset if Renacci were to win. Why the Ohio Republican Party is sending out the mailers? I've received at least 3 in my mailbox, huge mailers about this. Why are they doubling down on this? What's the strategy? Are they trying to suppress the vote among independents or folks who might vote for Sherrod Brown? What's going on?
You know, I wish I knew the answer to that question. I have also received some of those mailers. I'm not quite sure why they're doing this because it doesn't really seem to play well. I mean, you know, even with you look at the Kavanaugh hearings, there were allegations of abuse there, and you know, they were allegations. It all comes down to a he said, she said kind of thing, and it is definitely not the kind of thing that voters say that is, of top interest to them. They want to talk, and we are seeing the Republicans kind of talk more now, except for Renacci. We're seeing the Republicans talk more about taxes and jobs and, things that people say that they care about in polling. The rape kits, the Me Too movement, and all these other things are not things that routinely come up in polling that voters care about as much.
You worried about any blowback long term on the Republican Party for going down this road? Because past campaigns have stayed away from this.
No, not at all. I think if Sherrod Brown wants to run in 2020 as the top of the ticket for president or vice president candidate, possibly this issue will come back up on a national stage, and we'll be back to where we are today. So I think the record's been set, and again, I still believe Sherrod Brown will win.
And if he does that, though, let's remember that these allegations came up when President Trump was running for office, and he was still elected. Yeah. So.
That's kind of what Renacci's point is. So, all right, next candidate. Next topic. As is the case every year, there are other candidates on the ballot. Besides the Democrat and Republican candidates, they have extremely small chances of winning, but in close elections, they can play the role of spoiler. In the race for governor, Travis Irvine is the Libertarian candidate, and Constance Goodell Newton is the Green Party candidate. Here is a sample of their platforms. In addition to his desire for smaller government, Irvine wants to reduce the financial burden of Medicaid expansion, which sounds a lot like cutting it. He wants to require de-escalation training for police and end the death penalty in Ohio. He proposes all immigrants, legal and illegal, be able to get legal work permits and be able to apply for citizenship after 3 years. And he wants to legalize marijuana. Goodell Newton's platforms have more detail. Here are a few notable items. She wants to institute a single-payer health insurance system in Ohio. She wants to phase in a universal basic income by taxing corporations. She would raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Under her plan, by 2030, 12 years from now, Ohio would get 100% of its energy from renewable sources, and she too would legalize pot. Joe Mas, how worried are Democrats in particular? Because even the Libertarian has pretty progressive views on his platform. Indeed. How worried are Democrats that these two candidates could peel away votes from?
I have heard nothing about a worry concerning the minor candidates and their issues as peeling people away. But I will tell you, I am traumatized from the 2000 race where Ralph Nader may in fact have swung the race in the state of Florida and therefore away from the Democrats. So that scares me. What I do,
do you think it's the Green Party candidate's fault there, or is it the fault of the Democrat not having a strong enough candidate?
No, I think it's the voters' fault. I think that there are people who believe that the perfect can be the enemy of the good. I think that there are people that, and this happened, you remember, in the election in '92 with Ross Perot peeling away from Bush. So I think either party can be hurt by a minor party coming in. What I do like about it is that it performs the function of a petri dish of exploring ideas that sometimes they do stick to the wall. And I'll give you an example. Bernie Sanders bringing up about free tuition for secondary education, for higher education.
Do either of these platforms, they're pretty far out there. Can a third-party candidate, even though there are two others, so it's four technically here, Joe, can they reasonably stand a chance with stances in their platform that are so extreme? Universal basic income, basically pay everybody a certain amount, whether they're working or not.
No, they can't stand a chance. There's no way that either one of these candidates are going to be elected governor, let's face that. But what they can do is speak to issues in a different way. Now, here's the thing, though. Both of these candidates, we're not seeing, when there are debates and they're excluded from them, we hear more complaints about how they were excluded from the debate rather than them responding to the candidates that were included in the debate as far as what they would have done differently. And their message is not getting out without the mainstream media, and they're not finding new ways to get that message out, and that's been a problem for them.
So, Jackie, how should media organizations cover these candidates that are polling at 1 or 2%?
1 or 2% of the story? I'm kidding. No, I mean...
It's not a bad formula.
It was a joke. No, it's hard because, some of the ideas that they bring up are worth discussing and extremely interesting to voters. And I think many Ohio voters would find, even just in the totality, those platforms really appealing. But at the end of the day, typically they want to pick a winner. And those parties have had trouble, first of all, even getting on the ballot. Some of that is not their fault, thanks to the Ohio legislature making it a little bit more difficult to help John Kasich. Also fundraising. So like Joe said, if they're not getting the free earned media, it's not like they are able then to go above and beyond that. So there's a lot of challenges, but I mean, everything is set up to be a two-party system.
Yeah. Mike, how should they break through?
Well, they're not going to break through. Look, there's diverse opinions in both parties. That's why you always have third, fourth party candidates for the fringe elements of both parties. Look, Rich Cordray still struggles with name ID in certain parts of the state, and he's spending millions of dollars, so these third, fourth party candidates aren't going to impact the election. And Joe, I'm still traumatized that Ross Perot impacted the election for George Bush and brought Bill Clinton into office.
I think it is.
Some say that Perot took votes away from both of them equally, but we won't go back that far. It is a catch-22 because I don't think that minor party candidates should be included in debates if they're not polling at least at 5%, because you only have an hour, and if you have this candidate who has no chance of winning, no chance of governing, you're just taking time away from the other two. So it's a catch-22, how do they get better poll numbers if they're not in debates? My argument is go out and campaign, raise some money. That's the system we're in. Start at school board, don't shoot for governor.
By the way, I wanted to comment that a lot of the people that I think vote for these minor parties are people that don't have a great history in voting in the first place. And they're sort of like getting their feet wet there. And hopefully at some point they will decide which one of the two major parties are going to endorse. We're in an existential moment right now, as we were 2 years ago. And I think it's important for people to realize where the fight is and where to take sides.
They're tapping into voters who are disappointed in the two major parties and are looking for an alternative. And I know that's always been their pitch, but maybe now more than ever, people are looking for alternatives.
Yeah, they have to get. There has to be a groundswell of anger over these two parties.
A lot of reason to be disappointed.
And it's happened before. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt and way back, but it's been a while.
Bull moose.
Yeah. All right, our last topic. John Kasich continues to buck Republicans as he prepares to leave the governor's office. Of course, he expanded Medicaid. He's wanted to hike taxes on natural gas drillers. More recently, he's called for some gun control measures, and now he's putting a stake in the ground, or a stake in the algae bloom, as the case might be, on farm runoff that pollutes Lake Erie. This summer announced Get Tough measures to make farmers reduce fertilizer runoff, which causes those nasty green algae blooms in Lake Erie. But apparently, State Agriculture Director David Daniels was not doing enough to carry out his order. So, as first reported by the Dispatch, Kasich fired him. Joe Ingles, why fire your ag director with just 3 months left in your term?
Well, the executive orders have not largely been carried out. They've kind of been stymied by a panel that has to kind of give an okay. And the farmers don't want this, right? And Dave Daniels, farmer for life. I mean, he's from Greenfield, Ohio. The family has farmed forever. He's a former lawmaker. He was kind of sent in there to do the business of bringing the farmers to the table. He wasn't doing that. Apparently, he was kind of questioning Governor Kasich on how this was implemented and saying, hey, it needs more study. And Governor Kasich says, you know what? It's time for a change. We're going into the last days, and I want someone in there who's going to work harder to make this happen. But let's not forget, Governor Kasich could be a candidate for president at some point in the future. So how will this play when he goes out and he has this on his record? It could play well with environmentalists.
Mike, Director Daniels, I actually am highly sympathetic here with the director, even though I'm an environmentalist and I've seen the impact of the algal bloom not only in the smaller lakes but also in Lake Erie. But I think what he actually was saying is we don't have the resources to help the farmers to control this. Not necessarily that I think that the farmers are behind it. I think behind the governor. Yeah. I think that Director Daniels is behind the governor's mandate. The problem is this is extraordinarily expensive to try to control the runoff, and particularly with the poultry and hog farms.
Mike, is this just another example of how John Kasich is just drifting towards the center, at least, on some issues?
Not necessarily. Look, Dave Daniels was a terrific public servant in the legislature as well as the director of agriculture, and we should thank him for his service. But you serve at the pleasure of the governor. The governor has an agenda. He has policies. He hires directors to implement those policies. As you know, I'm a member of the state medical board. The governor has policies for opioids and other actions for the medical community. It's our job as medical board members to implement Governor Kasich's plan. So if Dave didn't want to do that, it's the governor's discretion and his authority to replace that director for whatever the agency may be.
It is odd, though, to let him go with 2.5 months till, people have been exiting the Kasich administration for over a year now, and they're not being replaced, or, they're being replaced with people who are really intending it to be a temporary position. So that is kind of confusing, especially because it's for an executive order, which could change with the next governor. The next governor on his first day could just, repeal it and get rid of it. And it's also a very involved process. It's not like this executive order, once it goes through, boom, we're going to solve the runoff problem and solve the issue within Lake Erie. It's going to take, I think they were talking about phasing it in over like a year, that these new rules wouldn't even take effect for at least a year. So. All right.
Let's get to our off-the-record parting shots. And Joseph Moss, you're up first.
A sad one, Mike. In a recent OSU thesis published by Dr. Austin Coker, he reports that Franklin County leads the United States in deportations either for no reason or for a minor traffic violation. And yesterday in Franklin County Municipal Court, I had the sad experience of having a client taken from me by ICE by immigration authorities, and he was there for a minor traffic violation. The sharp edge of Trump's anti-immigrant efforts has reached us.
Mike.
Ohio and Franklin County Democrats should be alarmed. As you know, absentee ballot requests heavily favor Democrats, but as of this morning when I called the Franklin County Board of Elections, Democrats only have a 1,000 to 2,000 number advantage. Right now, historically, it's 2 to 3 to 1 in absentee ballot requests. Republicans are keeping pace with Democrats in Franklin County, and that spells bad news for Democrats in November.
Joe.
I would love to know what the Republican polling is saying, because we're seeing President Trump proposing this tax cut for middle-class families, but the Congress isn't in to approve such a tax cut. He and at least one of the congressmen are saying, you know what, you vote for Republicans this election, we'll make sure you get a tax cut after the election. But, you know, how that plays with people and why they're doing this is another thing.
And Jackie.
I don't make predictions, but I predict that President Trump will be back in Ohio before Election Day. We went out and talked to a bunch of voters across the state in the last week, and Trump and national politics came up before anyone even thought about Mike DeWine or Rich Cordray. So I think that's probably what their polling is telling them, and get ready.
All right, speaking of polls, I, for one, want to get rid of the generic poll. The generic voters do not vote for generic candidates, and they certainly do not vote in generic districts with all the gerrymandering that's happening around the country. So pay very little attention to generic polls that show either party gaining or winning or whatever. Anyway, that is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We shan't Snapchat, at least not yet. And our website offers this show on demand at any time, and it's wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.